they bumped their head or they had forces in their head that could cause that. And if they do, they'll typically say they have a concussion, but then they don't do anything about it other than diagnose it.
Could you or a loved one suffer from a brain injury from an accident and not even be aware of it? Well, that's what we're going to find out today, because that's what we're going to ask the lawyer. Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest is Utah attorney Kevin Swenson. I want to remind you right at the top, if you'd like to ask Kevin questions about your specific situation, head over to AskTheLawyers.com. Click the button at the top of the page that says Ask a Lawyer, and you can ask your questions right there. Kevin, good to see you as always. Thank you for helping us out.
Thanks, Rob.
So let's talk about traumatic brain injuries. Do brain injuries, are they one of those things that show up right away? Say someone's been in an auto accident, collision. Is that the kind of thing that's going to be noticed right away?
You know, sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. And one of the problems with the traumatic brain injury is sometimes it's not diagnosed quickly either. Or it will be diagnosed as a concussion, but nothing more is said about it.
Well, I would imagine in the emergency room, obviously, if there's a broken bone or something like that, that's easily seen. And
Correct.
especially if it's a situation where they're trying to work very quickly, that maybe they're not testing done for brain injuries. Does that often happen?
That often happens. Yeah, it's very common for somebody to go in and not have a traumatic brain injury diagnosed quickly.
So what are some of the symptoms that maybe that if someone's been in an accident and they may have a brain injury, what are some of the symptoms to look out for early on?
Well, some of the symptoms you're going to look for are headaches, sometimes forgetfulness. A lot of times people have a problem where they can't grab a word. They know what they're trying to say, but they can't come up with it. They'll misplace their keys more frequently. Sometimes it's, they're a little quicker to anger. So there can be some cognitive issues and there can be some behavioral issues.
So like a change in personality.
Yeah, that's one of them.
And that would seem like that's the kind of thing that a family member or, maybe a coworker or somebody would notice maybe before an emergency room doctor.
Right. Yeah, and so what the emergency room doctor is going to be looking for is whether there was a force there, they bumped their head, or they had forces in their head that could cause that. And if they do, they'll typically say they have a concussion, but then they don't do anything about it other than diagnose it. They don't send them for treatment frequently. They just say, you have it.
What about with children, Kevin? Is it different for children, or what are some of the symptoms maybe parents should look for if their child was in an accident?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. If they're complaining of headaches, pain in the head, sometimes they're sleeping more, they're more irritable. And the problem with it is it can be a combination of any of those, and they're not required to have all of them. So it makes it a little tricky, but again, behavioral changes can be seen in children as well.
What are some of the after effects of a traumatic brain injury? Because I imagine this could go on days, weeks, even years down the road. What are some of the things that people with a TBI have to live with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the problems is that they don't get diagnosed, so they don't know they're having, they don't have a label for it.
Right.
But it's the irritability. They'll be tired. I mean, you may get in a crash and where you've been a person that's never taken a nap, you find yourself having to take a nap every day. You have headaches every day. People tell you something and then they'll say, hey, I just told you that, or, you'll ask a question. They'll say, we just talked about that yesterday. And so the memory sometimes is not as good. So you'll have the behavioral issues there as well as the cognitive. You may not be able to function as well.
It would seem like it could also affect someone's ability to make a living. Maybe they can't work, or maybe they can't do the same job they used to be able to do. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, that's common. So somebody will be working and they're able to show up, they're able to do their job, but they're able to do it at maybe 50% or 70%. And, they're trying hard and they just can't figure out why they're not getting it the way they used to. So that does happen pretty regularly.
Is the issue with traumatic brain injuries also, Kevin, that it not only affects the person who is injured, but their families or their caregivers as well?
Yeah. Often it affects them as every bit as much because the person with the traumatic brain injury may or may not know they have it. and the people around are saying, "Why are you so ornery? Why are you being grumpy to me? I'm trying to help you, and
Right.
you're shouting at me." Or they're changing, and there's not a good reason for it because it hasn't been diagnosed or dealt with.
So how can a personal injury attorney like yourself help? What can an attorney do for someone who may have suffered a brain injury because of, say, a car crash or a truck crash, something like that?
Yeah, so we always are looking at the medical records, and if somebody has been diagnosed with a concussion, we will talk to them and say, "Hey, are you having these kind of symptoms?" But then we'll also talk to a family member. "Hey, are you seeing these kind of things with them?" And then the best thing we can do for them is get them into a good medical provider, get them into a neurologist or a neuropsychologist to have them evaluate and figure out what's really going on with them.
And it would seem like sometimes people don't even know to look for that. They may not even realize that that's a thing. So having somebody with the experience to help with that would be valuable.
Yeah, it is because, like you say, they just go unnoticed a lot of times. And so when you ask the questions and talk to the family members, I mean, you obviously don't want to create something that isn't there.
Right.
But if there's an issue there, you want to know about it and you want to get help for them and let them deal with it.
What's your advice for picking an attorney if you suspect that may be an issue, that maybe there's a brain injury involved? What's your advice for picking the right attorney to help?
Make sure you pick an attorney who deals with traumatic brain injury, who has, tried the cases,
Mhm.
taken them to court, knows what to do, knows how to handle them, and that an insurance company knows how to handle them as well. Because, like they're missed in the medical side, a lot of times they're missed in the legal side too. An attorney will read a record and say, "Oh, they had a concussion," and that's kind of where it ends.
Uh,
So getting somebody who knows how to deal with them all the way through a trial.
and it would also seem that it's helpful to get somebody who has the experience to know what sort of um, damages to seek for that sort of thing. What sort of because there's probably a lot of costs that are going to be involved with something like that people may not think about.
Yeah, that's true. There are always issues of, continuing training or rehabilitation or, and something you'll need counseling or different issues, for the next several years. And if you don't get that accounted for, then that's something that's got to come out of the injured person's pocket instead of the responsible person's pocket.
Lots of helpful information as always, Kevin. Thank you for making some time to answer our question.
Thank you.
That's going to take care of this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been Utah attorney Kevin Swenson. I want to remind you, if you'd like to ask Kevin questions about your specific situation, head over to askthelawyer.com. Click the button at the top of the page that says Ask a Lawyer, and it doesn't cost you anything to ask a question. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with Ask the Lawyers.